What you need to know is that salvation is by faith and faith alone in Jesus Christ. And faith alone in Jesus Christ is preceded and followed by repentance. A turning away from sin, a hatred for the things that God hates and a love for the things that God loves. A growing in holiness and a desire not to be like Britney Spears, not to be like the world, and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
Worship Christ because He's God. He's not like God. He's not close to God. He's not almost God. Jesus Christ is God.
Once I turned to Jesus and I realized how He had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom.
The Holy Spirit's in Elijah. The Holy Spirit's in Elisha. The Holy Spirit's in John the Baptizer. The Holy Spirit is in Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit is in you if you belong to Jesus.
Let me have Christ whether I'm sick or well. Let me have Christ whether I'm rich or poor. Let me have Christ whether I'm alive or dead. Let me have Christ for my sins, and Christ for my guide, and Christ for my power, and Christ for my king.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back here for another Monday night of the Bible Lens podcast. We've made it to 12. I know you wouldn't think we would make it this far, but we are here for episode 12 of this show. And we got our lovely guests of people joining us once again for this epic show. We're doing part 2 of our series, Do Not Love the World. And we're going to be focusing on the topics of discord and hatred tonight. And we're going to talk about how the world that we live in, the one that says do not love the world, how it absolutely breeds us to hate and despise one another on a multitude of levels. But before we get there, let's go ahead and introduce our guest for tonight. Our good buddy Samantha is back with us. I think is wearing, what shirt is that?
Sweet Mama, it's the Jonas Brothers.
Oh yeah, somebody went to the Jonas Brothers concert last night. So, all the ladies were at in Anaheim. I was gonna say Anaheim. Wow, I'm way out of whack today. But in the Atlanta station. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift and her besties were in New York, and I think everyone hates football now as a result of that. So that's a good little change up there. And once again, joining us for the lovely Abyss once again is our good buddy Johnny. How you doing today, John boy?
Doing good. October 2nd.
Yep. Did you get the notification that everyone's emergency alarm is going to be tested on Wednesday?
Yeah, unless you have a really good Faraday cage.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I got a new phone that I got to set up now. I should probably get on that one because this one's dying rapidly, as we like to say. But we have some people joining us here for the show tonight. We have our good buddy Truth joining us here tonight as well. Then our good buddy Spencer, who is listening to us. Hopefully, he's working on one of my 2 articles that I've had in the queue for like 9 days now. So, hopefully he'll get to that one. But outside of that, thank you guys for joining us. We are on Rumble tonight. We're on Twitch tonight, and we're on YouTube. We're on all 3. We're working on finding alternatives away from Twitter right now, partly because of what we're going to be talking about here tonight, and other partly is because I'm shadow banned on Twitter right now, which means that nobody can search my name or see my post in the search, which is obviously not a great thing if you're trying to get the word out there. So we'll work on rearranging that here in the coming weeks. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but we are in fact working on it. Yeah, Truth says get on it, Spencer. Yeah, get on it, buddy. So we're here tonight because, like I said, last week we took a little break from our Revelation series and we started a brand new series called Do Not Love the World. And I think this is one that, you don't really hear talked about too much in modern churches today, especially if you're going to like an Andy Stanley church. Probably not going to hear this at all coming from his church sermons, but it's definitely one that needs to be talked about more because we're talking about like being a Christian and life as a Christian. And there's so many ways that the world pulls you away from the teachings of Christ, to the point where you really give a deep dive into the world that we live in today. And I said this before, like months ago, we really do live in a world that actively rebels against God and actively rebels against everything God told us not to do. Like, if you just take a deep look at our society, what's become normalized, what's our normal everyday activities, we're rebelling against God every single day. And as a Christian, it's very difficult when you're trying to stay on the straight and narrow, but the society that you live in, the world that you live in, makes it very, very hard to do that. We're going to go ahead and discuss that tonight. So, since I got you guys here, I'm going to do what I do on every show. I'm not going to give you guys any context of what we're going to be talking about tonight, but I will ask you a question, starting with Samantha here. So I guess the question to start off here is that who do you think is the most responsible for the hatred and the discord of the world today? Like, what do you think is responsible for the most hate and discord today that gets us all angry at each other and gets us all to despise and hate one another? I'll start with you,
Like what
Sam.
entity or like what general principle?
Either or, because it might be both.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, say Satan. Go back to my Christian roots.
Mm-hmm.
Satan is my final answer, Trebek.
I was hoping to trip her up with that one, but she actually did get that right. So we got a
Pew
ding
pew!
going on there. So now that we got that out of the way, which outlet do you think is the most useful for, I guess, causing discord and hatred between fellow brethren? So this is being more specific. Like, what do you think is the driving cause of essentially us being more divided now than we've ever been before?
Like social media wise, or
It could be anything you can think of. Like, what do you think is the problem with our society right now?
Satan. And I think that social media probably heightens the issue because there's a lot of echo chamber effect going on.
Oh yeah.
There'd really be no way of knowing.
Oh, we'll see about that, of course. Here, Johnny, what do you think is our biggest problem with keeping us divided here in our modern society?
I think the media, whether that's social media, media that comes across the radio waves, media that comes across your TV screen. I think it's media. I think we were kind of fine as a nation.
Mm-hmm.
Satan didn't really have as much of a hold on our country before all that stuff really started coming out and getting, propaganda shoved down our throats. So yeah.
So you guys are pretty interesting topics there, and I'm not saying that any of you guys are wrong. I think all of that is basically part of the machine that keeps us all divided. Now, I've heard this said from so many people over the last few years, and people who I'm not sure if they are saved Christians or not, but I think everyone has noticed it, that in the last 10 years, we seem to be more divided than we've ever been before. And it's gotten to a point where it's noticeable how much people just hate each other like these days, how much people are divided along battle lines in our society, in our world. And people are always asking, well, what's the cause? What can we do to stop it? I'm not sure if we can, let's just say, pull the brakes at this point based on where we're heading, but there is a number of things in our society that keeps us divided, that keeps us to hate each other. But before we get into the specifics of what I think is the biggest topics of our society today, I want to read you guys some very relevant Bible verses to kind of support the argument that we're going to make here. So we're going to start off a little bit going off of a few verses here, just in case you guys haven't realized. Now, if you guys have noticed, this series is called Do Not Love the World, and this is based on 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, which I'll read here. And it says very plainly in the word, do not love the world do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. And he who does the will of God will abide in it forever. So if you guys missed our first episode last week, we kind of talked about more of the lines of money and envy, which is something that obviously breeds a lot of hatred. And we were talking about how Satan essentially tempts humanity. And he does it by tempting the lust of your flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of your life, right? So we're talking about personal desires, we're talking about personal ambitions, and we're also talking about physical desires. Those are the three things that causes every human being to fall in the eyes of God, because those are the three things that we all struggle with today. Now, we all don't struggle with the same sins, but we all struggle with sin nonetheless. And these are, I guess, essentially the playbook of the enemy and how he gets you to fall. So we talked about this last week, but I do want to have a couple other Bible verses here that kind of talk about the things that we're going to talk about over the course of the night here. Now, this goes all the way to Galatians chapter 5. This is 19 through 21. Now, this is talking about the works of the flesh and the sins of the flesh. And it says very clearly here, now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanliness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery / witchcraft, hatred, obviously, highlight that one, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envies, murder, drunkenness, revelries, which I tell you beforehand, just as I told you in the past, that who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So this is a very convicting verse here, because if you've been guilty of any of these things at any point of your life, then as of right now, unless you have found Jesus Christ and you've been saved by the gospel of Jesus Christ, then you're probably under the wrath of God right now. That's not to alarm you. I just tell you that that's how things work. Now you think to yourself, well, man, I'm probably guilty of like multiple of these things. We've all been guilty of multiple of these things. Some of us might be guilty of all of them at some point in time. I'm not saying that there's murderers in here, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of things in here that you could check off, be like, nope, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that. Well, how do I get myself out of that? We will talk about this later on here, but this is kind of the idea that we're going off of. They're saying that, hey, look, if you're guilty of these things, then you're guilty of being not only in the wrath of God, but rebelling against God himself. And God has pretty much told you exactly what he doesn't like in a human being. Then we can go all the way to Proverbs here. Now, this is Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 and 19. And this is a very important one to highlight, just in case you haven't already highlighted this in your studies here. I'm going to go ahead and read this. It says, there are 6 things that the Lord hates. Yes, there are 7 abominations. The 6 things that the Lord hates. It says, yes, there are 7 are an abomination to him. And it says that these are the things that the Lord hates: a proud look, a lying tongue, hand that sheds innocent blood, a heart that deceives wicked plans, feet that are swift to running the evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and the one who sows discord among brethren. So if you look at this verse right here in Proverbs, it's telling you essentially the 7 things that God despises. So if you're guilty of any of these things, you are drawing the ire of God right now. Now, it's one thing to just look at this from kind of like an isolated perspective, but let's go even deeper into this verse here. Did you guys pick up on a few things that were being said here? And it's actually characteristics that God hates. This description here is telling you someone who God hates specifically. Do you know who that is, Samantha?
LeBron James.
No. Johnny.
Satan.
Yes. Shocker that Satan has come back into this conversation here. But we're talking about in this list of Proverbs here, he's not just giving you a list of characteristics that God despises. He's literally describing Satan himself, because these are the evil characteristics that Satan holds that God despises. A proud look, someone who views himself as a god in and of himself. A lying tongue, we're talking about Satan being the king of lies, the birth of lies is him. Hands that shed innocent blood, a murderer in his own name. A heart that deceives wicked plans. All the wicked plans of the world are devised by Satan. Feet that run swiftly to evil. No shocker there. False witness who speaks lies. Once again, we're talking about a liar. And then one who sows discord among brethren, which means that one who essentially creates a plan to have people hate one another. They're giving you a very strong condemnation of Satan and Satan's practices here. So what's kind of your takeaways from some of the verses that we read so far here, Johnny, just reading that? What's the thing that struck your eye on those 3 verses, I should say?
The description of Satan, I don't know where this came from in the Bible, but the fact that he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Mm-hmm. I think those are kind of generally represented among the sins that we kind of went through.
Yeah. Sam, what was your takeaway on that?
Yeah, so it's talking about the kind of people that won't inherit the kingdom, drunkenness, sexual immorality, murderers, all those things. Sounds a lot like Satan. So
I mean, it also sounds
I don't know where
like
you're going with this, so I don't have a lot else to add. But yeah, sounds familiar.
Let's just say I'm leading you down a path here, and maybe some of the things may strike a little light bulb here, deeper as we go. But like I said, the first few things we're talking about here is obviously the core message is do not love the world, because whoever loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So essentially, you have two sides here. If you're talking about something that is of God, that is made of God, then it is holy. Well, if it is not made of God, it is likely made by Satan. So if anything of the world does not represent God, it represents Satan, which means that you should not love it, you should not honor it, because it's pulling you away from the love of the Father, the love of the Son, and the love of the Holy Spirit. And then we go on to continue, like I said, the characteristics that, God has ire against. So a little note to keep in mind, if you're trying to, stay away from certain behaviors that you think upsets God, those will probably be good ones to stay away from, such as a lying tongue, such as, murder, such as causing discord amongst friends or amongst brothers or amongst, people in general. But there's a couple more verses that we want to talk here. So now we're going to jump over to the book of Romans. This is Romans 12, 9 through 21. And this is a discussion here. And the byline here is behave like a Christian. So this verse here is kind of giving you the playbook of how to live life and how to not live life when you're paying attention here. But let's go ahead and talk to this one. Like I said, Romans 12, chapters 9 through 21. I'll read through it here. It says, let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good, be kindly and affectionate to one another, and with brotherly love, in honor of giving the preference of one to another, not lagging in diligence, ferret of the Spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient to the tribulation, continuing steadfast in prayers, contributing to the needs of the saints, and given to hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep for those who weep. Be in the same mind towards one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Repay no one evil for evil. Excuse me. Have regard for the good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, have as much as depends on you, live peacefully with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give the place to wrath, which is written, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, say the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. In so doing so, you heap the coals of fire on his head. Do not overcome evil. Said, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So what you're seeing here is that it's giving you a list here saying that, hey, look, the world is a messed up place. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to hate you for the things that you believe and for the things that you hold near and dear to your heart. But it's important that you guys do not essentially go out there and essentially try to fight hate with hate. And it's very easy to look at the world and what the world's becoming and to become very, very angry and be very, very hateful of the world. But the book is telling you here, do not do that. God is telling you, do not do that, because he is going to be the one who deals out vengeance of the world. So like I said, it's very easy to look at the wickedness of the world, the evil of the world, and feel like that I need to take matters into my own hands and serve justice in and of itself. But what God is saying is that no, vengeance will be mine. I'm going to be the one to make sure that the wicked are punished, not you. Your job is essentially hold my word and hold my oath of loving your neighbor, loving each other, and beating evil with good, rather than trying to beat evil with evil. Because of what we mentioned in the book of Matthew, when they were accusing Jesus Christ of being a sorcerer because he was performing these miracles, and he flat out told you, it's like, how can Satan beat Satan? Like, how can you defeat evil with evil? You can't. So it's the idea of that, well, if they're bad, then that means we need to be even more bad, and we need to give them a taste of their own medicine. That's not the way that God wants you to solve your problems there. That's not the way he goes about it at all. And this is a great one too, because I'm pretty sure if anyone has been a Christian in any sort of time of their life, if you've been one long enough, you've probably heard the term "love thy neighbor." Right now, a lot of people in the Christian community believes that this is the only thing that Jesus ever said, and then this is the only thing that you should ever pay attention to is love thy neighbor, and then nothing else really outside of that. Right? But it goes even deeper here, and it kind of explains the idea and the concept of loving one's neighbor. Now, this is Romans 13, chapter 8, and chapter 13, verses 8 through 14 here, and it says, "Love your neighbor." It says, "Owe one anything except to love another, and for who he finds love has fulfilled the law. For the commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, you should not murder, you should not steal, you should not bear false witness, you shall not covet. If there is any other commandment, they're all summed up in this saying, which basically says, love your neighbor as yourself. Love does not do harm to your neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law." And I'm going to get back to that one here in a second, but let me finish this here. It says, "And to do this, knowing the time, knowing that it is a high time to wake out of sleep, for now our salvation is near, and that we have, when we first believed." It says, "The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness. Let us put in the armor of the light. Let us work properly, and let us walk properly as the day, as not in revelry or drunkenness or in lewdness or in lust, not in strife or in envy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision to the flesh to fulfill its lusts." So there's a lot of people out there who obviously believe in the idea of working your way to salvation. There's a lot of sectors out there that believe in work-based salvation. We've talked about Roman Catholicism. They're not the only one. There's a lot of Protestant denominations that also believe in a works-based salvation. You have other people out there, such as, Judaism, that still believes in the old law of the Old Testament. And part of the problem of rejecting the New Testament for a lot of people, that if you're in that camp, is that they're saying here that when Jesus came and he made the confirmation of love thy neighbor and love your neighbor like you love yourself, what he's saying is that if you want to fulfill the law, if you want to honor the law of God, fulfilling that law means to love your neighbor. Because if you actually love your neighbor like yourself, you're not going to commit adultery. You're not going to commit murder. You're not going to steal from him. You're not going to lie on him. You're not going to covet his things, right? You talk about the 10 commandments. These are all things that you should not do against your neighbor. Now, obviously, there's a couple of them, like don't have any other gods like before me. But the basic idea here is that if you want to follow all the commandments, if you want to essentially fulfill the law, it's also loved in the one phrase, love thy neighbor as you love yourself, which means that do not do anything to others that you would not have done to yourself. Because I don't know if you guys paid attention here, but Jesus also said, hey, you reap what you sow, which means that if this is the type of actions that you have towards others, and you can definitely expect that that action will be repaid to you in one way or another. So don't let them burn says, let the word of God purge your intentions. A perfect summary there of what we're saying here with the second half of this, which is put on Christ, which means that if you want to fight the world, if you want to fight the darkness of the world, you have to fight it through the works of Jesus Christ, through the faith in Jesus Christ, and through the works of Jesus Christ. That's the only way you're going to be able to overcome the provision and the lust of the flesh. So go ahead and give you guys some important context there. That's kind of our biblical portion here of this story here. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to you. I'll start with Johnny. Based on the summarization that I gave you here for Romans 12, Romans 13, I'll go ahead and start with you. What do you think is the fundamental problem that keeps us, I guess the fundamental issue that keeps us from loving our neighbors as we love ourselves based on what we read there?
I think one of the fundamental problems is we don't know what love is. I think, especially in our culture today, one thing we've forgotten is love does not require approval. If my parents approved of every single thing I did, patted me on the back for doing drugs or whatever, they wouldn't be very loving, right? In the same way, God doesn't approve of all of our sins, but he still loves us. And so I think as we go about, trying to love our neighbors, we have to be careful to not approve of everything they do.
No, I thought you had another point there. So I'll pause. Sam, do you agree with that? What do you think that is our biggest problem separating us from being able to love our neighbors like ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think approval is part of it. You can approve of somebody. Jesus approved of everybody he met, but he didn't necessarily approve of what they did. I think the issue is there's a lot of politics that get involved with it. So people like to lean right or lean left and kind of judge people based on a moral guideline that's defined by politics, as opposed to just looking at the individual. And so I think there's a certain level, like any society you look at, there's going to be a level of polarization there that's causing people to have a divide that's kind of invisible and unnecessary. I think that's probably a good part of it. And I think it's, if you look at people through the lens of the Bible and the way that Jesus looked at people, then you're not going to fall into that camp.
At least that would be the hope, and that's what. And actually, I'm glad Kate brought this up too. It says, "Hate the sin, not the sinner." I wonder if someone said that fairly recently in the last 24 hours in a completely different context that we
Jesus.
Had here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, me too. I mean, I said it.
Somebody.
Yeah, exactly right. But no, he actually brought up a great point, because that's a perfect parallel to what we're going to start off this conversation. And it's almost if we're on the same wavelength there, Sam. You try to stray away from there, but we always move back in the same road. I personally believe that the biggest dissension, what causes the biggest dissension of hatred in the political spirit and the human spirit, is in fact politics itself. Because when you look at politics, everything has been so encased in politics in that one giant umbrella that, especially over the last, you could say, 10, 20 years, I know we all like to think that, our current seed of like dissension and hatred and the way our society is really started like 10 years ago. It's like, no, it's been going on much deeper than that. I think 10 years ago when people started to notice it, like getting it really, really bad on that point. But no, it has been going on for years. You can go all the way back to the 1960s. About how a lot of things that were born in the 1960s led up to where we are today. But in all honesty, you can go back even further than that to find out the ideologies that created what the movement that caused in the 1960s, going back even further than that. I mean, you're talking about like the rise of Marxism and things that, really divide us by, family, by religion and all kinds of stuff. Like, this has been a slow build for many, many centuries, longer than any of us have been alive, like here on this planet. But I think when you really get down to it, especially modern American politics, this seems to be the biggest thing that divides us. This seems to be the biggest thing that causes the most hatred between us, because when it comes to politics, we've been perfectly divided by a number of subsets that have absolutely nothing to do about being a believer in Christ whatsoever. We're divided on political affiliation. If we're Democrat or Republican, then we hate each other. If we're, you look at some of these sub issues that we're dealing with in the world of politics, you look at what's like men and women are now divided on the whole idea of like feminism and masculinity. You have obviously race-based division with, black people, white people, Hispanics, Latinx. The whole LGBTQ thing has divided a lot of people, whether you're on the side of, the gay and the trans movement. If you're not on the side of it, it's like there's so many things related to politics, and there's one giant umbrella of politics that has made it to a point where we can't even stand looking at people who basically don't have the same opinions as us, who don't have the same political viewpoints as us. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have paid attention to the last few years here, but during the whole COVID outbreak and that whole debacle, I think division had reached a fever pitch that we probably hadn't seen in the history of this country, to where if you were wearing a mask in a certain city, or if you were not wearing a mask in a certain city or a certain state, people looked at you like there was something like wrong with you. And we've even seen it escalate to a point where people literally got in fist fights with one another because, oh, you're in a grocery store, you're not wearing a mask, you're a threat to me. Or, oh, you're making me wear a mask and this is especially, you're a threat to me. And people are just at an all-time heated point when it comes to political hatred, when it comes to hatred of people. I mean, we've gotten to the point now where if someone on the opposite side of my political affiliation dies, I'm going to celebrate his death, because in my mind, anyone who isn't in my political affiliation is a bad person who probably deserves it. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a couple of examples here of what has been fueling the political hatred here in our country here. Have you guys heard of the Young Turks? Have you guys heard of the Young Turks? The Young Turks is a long-standing YouTube channel that is politically progressive, politically to the left. So they obviously play up a lot of these progressive issues on the left-hand side. They've been on YouTube for many, many years. I used to watch them back in like 2008, 2009. That's how far back it goes. You can find videos that they posted going back 17 years up to this point. But they're kind of like the go-to YouTube outlet for left-wing politics here. And Anna Kasparian is a person who has been on the show for a very, very long time. And she is prone to having meltdowns where she lashes out at people on the other side of the aisle because, they have opposite opinions of her. This includes, of course, Christians. No big shock there, but pretty much anyone who opposes universal income and LGBTQ issues and race issues, stuff like this. So here's a quick little summary of the type of things that you see normalized. Now, I'm only using her as an example. I'm not saying that she's the most evil person in the world. She's not. I'm just showing these examples of this is what our political discourse has become in the year 2023 in the most part. So I'll give you a quick little clip here of Anna basically saying that she's better than you because of what she believes. So here you go.
Look, I've come to the realization that the people who get that rise out of, attacking others, putting other people down, those are miserable people, right? They're not happy people. And so this is how they get joy in their life. And I feel like if you see memes like that, or if you see people getting attacked, or if you will sit back and have no emotion when you see unarmed individuals getting shot and killed, well then, look, you're a sociopath, right? And so I feel bad for you more than anything, right? And so if you want to attack me for being overly emotional or for passionately, defending those who are defenseless, then go ahead, you can attack me all you want. But am I saying that I'm better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you, okay? Much better than you. You are garbage, okay? If you get a rise out of attacking the powerless, you're garbage. And you can call me a social justice warrior. You can call me whatever the fuck you want. At this point, I don't give a shit, okay? That's it. That's who I am. And it is what it is.
Boom. That's a pretty hangry woman. The term that used to describe her. Nicer than I would probably say if we weren't on this show right now. But it's just kind of an example of the mindset of one side of the political aisle. It's like you have a mindset of people who, like I said, are generally not Christian. They're not saved people, so they don't really hold any kind of biblical views. Their worldview kind of comes from the world itself, which could be a very dangerous thing, obviously, if you've been paying attention to the theme of this series here. But these are people who believe that, no, if you don't believe the same things that I believe, because I'm morally correct in this whole situation. So I support Black Lives Matter. I support gay marriage. If you don't side with me, that means that you're an immoral person, that you're a garbage person, right? And that causes hatred on one side. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that hatred isn't reciprocated on the other side, because it is. So when you hear people like Anna Kasparian and Chink Uygur and those people make comments like that, it's only natural that you'll get the opposite side of the reaction, saying that no, it's not us who is wrong, it's you who's wrong. And then you end up getting reactions like this. This is Steven Crowder. This is a slightly older video, but Steven Crowder, like I said, he's another YouTube guy who's been on for many, many years, and he's kind of the voice of the right-wing opposition here. So you have people from the Young Turks from the left, you have people like Steven Crowder on the right, and once again, we're just answering venom with even more venom. So here's a short little clip of him.
The people who voted for Barack Obama, a significant amount of them, Donald Trump could not win without enough of those votes. And those people aren't racist. There are a lot of criticisms to have with Donald Trump. And Shank earlier going, well, when you call people racist? No, it's because of you. When you call someone racist, when you call them sexist, when you call them homophobic, when you call them transphobic because they don't want a tranny taking a dump next to their 6-year-old daughter in some Charlotte Chuck E. Cheese, guess what? They pull the lever for Trump after they voted for Obama, you dipshit. So stop acting like the only possible motivating factor here that you could fathom is racism. I bet you're the kind of guy who walks into a bar and they don't like you. You know, what is it, because I'm a Turk? No, it's because you smell. You look like a greasy, slick water buffalo who's drowning amidst the throes of being swallowed by an anaconda, and you're a dick. It's not because you're brown, just like it's not because Donald Trump's racist. Gerald, what did you want to say?
So yeah, you can see there's the opposite reaction. Like I said, there's a lot of heat and a lot of fire thrown in one. So let's keep this in context here. This isn't like a debate whether, oh, well, the right is wrong because of this or the left is wrong because of this. We're just highlighting that this is essentially what political discourse has become in our current year now. It's one side yelling at another. It's one side hating another, throwing out insults, saying, well, I'm a better person than you because you're garbage. And then the other person said, no, actually, you're garbage. You're a dick, and I hate you. And then this is the platform of political discussion here in 2023. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to lie to you guys. I was big on the political, I think, theme here between like 2016, especially during like the COVID like outbreak. Like if you guys have followed me long enough, you guys know that when I was on Twitter, I was calling out, the government for the shutdowns and for all this stuff going on, people being too emotional and all this stuff. And after a while, especially when you've been doing it for years, you tend to realize one thing. I think Tucker Carlson actually put it very great. It's like this whole idea that, well, if we just come up with like the perfect argument that we can give to someone, then maybe they can see things our way. And it's like, no, I've been doing that for over 30 years. Hasn't worked out very well. That's usually not how you win like arguments, right? So what you end up doing is that you just create more content for people to hate, people get angry at, and you create enemies with one another. And we all essentially look at ourselves as enemies. We also look at ourselves as evil and bad, not understanding that we're all on the same side of humanity, because as we'll get deeper into the show here, you realize that there's a lot of people who don't feel that, let's say all of us are on the same side of humanity there. There's some people who would like to get rid of a lot of people on one shape of form here as we get deeper into this conversation. Let me ask you this one. I guess we can start here with Johnny. What's coming the most, what's your take on kind of our current political discourse and how it has fueled this fire of just like dissension and, like I said, discord and hatred in our nation? Because it feels like the political aspect since Donald Trump rose to power, and I'm not saying that Donald Trump's at fault for this, but I mean, we have seen venom pointing towards Trump that we hadn't seen in the last like decades before this. But what's kind of your view on politics in our current year?
I think it was best illustrated at the Donald Trump and Joe Biden presidential debate back in 2020, when essentially it was just a contest of who could interrupt each other more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is essentially like what we're looking for is division on purpose, and it's not only that, but I mean, if you look at just the political parties, like the whole Democrat and Republican side, neither side is really doing anything to help anyone's lives. They're only doing things to make people's lives worse. But it's this whole idea that we owe allegiance to this team because they share some of my values, or they allegedly share some of my values. But we're going to keep hating each other based on political affiliation, and then realize that things aren't exactly getting much better for us. It's only gotten further and further the other way here. Sam, are you someone who kind of stays away from the political sphere, and if so, why exactly is that?
So I definitely have my politics, just because I try to align more with the side that I think honors God more. Use your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But
clearly
I try not to get
Turks, right?
yeah. I try not to get like too affiliated with politics to the point that I can't see through it. So I think all politics are evil. It's just a matter of kind of hoping that you can vote for the side that would do the right thing. But that said, I don't, even Jesus himself was a pretty non-political figure. You got to go by the Bible first, and politics, not even second, maybe like third, fourth. Just kind of pray to the Lord that people do the right thing. They usually don't. It's pretty corrupt.
Yeah, and that's kind of our, like I said, been our political spear for quite some time now. It's just all corruption. And we always like to talk about, like, if you follow this channel specifically, we always like to talk about like just how bad Hollywood is and how like evil and satanic a lot of things that comes out of Hollywood. And I don't think we spend enough time talking about the things that comes out of Washington, because in a lot of ways, Washington, especially nowadays, controls a lot of the stuff that happens in Hollywood, like today. Like this is something that we'll go touch up on more tomorrow night on the Barroom podcast, but there's a push right now because Taylor Swift is dating this football player and the NFL won't stop talking about Taylor Swift. There's a push now to use Taylor Swift's power to promote like to Democrat politics in the upcoming election that's coming up next year, right? So you find out that, you know, a lot of these people in Hollywood are essentially just puppets for a larger agenda in Washington. They're being used to promote, you know, these ideologies and promote, you know, these laws and promote these standards that come from the top, which is out of Washington. So we talk about like the puppet masters. I'm not saying that Washington isn't quote the puppet master of the show here, because even Washington has its own puppets, but a lot of the stuff just trickles downhill into that sphere. Like I said, it's things that just keeps us all divided, keeps us all hating each other. And when you look at the realm of politics, it's one thing to say that I don't like this person because he's a Democrat, I don't like this person because he's a Republican, but then we start going even deeper into that, because it's not just, you know, Democrat versus Republican anymore. That used to be the case for many, many decades now, but now we've started to go from attacking the politicians to attacking the people who support the politicians. This is definitely something that we've seen here over the last 10 so years. I remember back in like 2004 when everyone hated Bush, right? And I'm talking about W. Bush, not HW, but everyone hated Bush at that time. There was a lot of people on the Democrat side attacking Bush. The media would come out and attack Bush all the time, make it seem like he was the worst president ever. That Hitler word was thrown around a lot of times when we were discussing Bush. But I think the difference between the time of Bush versus the time of Trump, which we fast forwarded to over the years, is that it used to be that, you know, well, we'll attack, you know, the politician, we'll attack him and smear him, but we won't go after the voters, because at the end of the day, we still need to, I guess, convince the voters to support us, right? We still need to get those votes at the end of the day. And ever since, I think, Trump, those rules have been completely thrown out of the window, because now we're attacking people who support the politicians. They say, oh, you support Trump, you voted for Trump, oh, you're a racist, oh, you supported him, you're a sexist, you support him, oh, you're homophobic. Now all of a sudden we're taking the heat that used to go to the politicians, because they were the figurehead of all the policies, the figurehead of all the agendas here, and now we're going after the voters. So now we've gone a step further to start attacking the people who support the political party. And one of the ways that we've separated this over, especially the last few years, is the debate on race. There's a lot of people now that are going after white people, blaming white people for the problems of the world. I'm pretty sure you guys have all heard the terms white supremacy over the last few years, or white nationalism and white fragility, and everything is going on about white people coming from the Black Lives Matter camp. And then increasingly over the last few years, as a result of that, you've had a lot of people throw a lot of heat back at the black community, saying that, well, they're saying that we're the problem, but I mean, look at them, they're creating all the violence, they're creating all the broken homes. And now you started to have, because there's been so much heat towards one side, now the heat's being thrown back towards the other. And this is the same thing that we see time and time again. You're going to see time and time again, when one side gets attacked, all of a sudden there's going to be a growing division from the other side. And next thing you know, these two people are at complete war with each other, and there's no possible way of reconciliation. This is a good example of, I guess, both sides of this political debate here. So this is a video by some YouTube channel called Cut. I can only assume that it's some kind of a black nationalist type of deal here, but they did a video a year ago called, it was literally called "What Are White People Superior At?" And it's literally just a minute of them trashing white people. So this is essentially the setup of more division and more hatred here. And then you can see the response to it, which is also not too great either. But this is basically Cut's video, if we go here.
What are white people superior at?
What exactly are white people superior at?
They're real good at violence.
Violence? Genocide. It's like stealing people's lives just because they feel like it.
If you are white and you know this is happening and you say nothing, then you're a killer too.
What exactly are white people superior at?
Insecurity? Pretending?
Fear. Being fearful of nothing.
Being ignorant.
Blame.
Letting their egos control their every move. Superior at being dicks.
What exactly are white people superior at?
Oppression.
Gaslighting.
Lack of empathy.
Intellectualizing oppression.
Did I say oppression? What exactly are white people superior at?
Taking what's not theirs.
Taking shit.
Taking our ideas.
Copycatting.
Gentrification.
Appropriating things that do not belong to them.
Taking over other people's cultures and making you believe that they invented it.
Maybe they're thinking of it as repurposing. It's like recycle and repurpose.
As my grandma would say, them white folk, they'll take it if you don't copyright it.
They are very good at destruction of land, destruction of people, destruction of humanness.
Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you're conservative, like white people are really good at upholding white supremacy.
How about claiming that, they are actually a whole separate race, when actually white DNA comes from the black female?
So what exactly are white people superior at?
Honey, lying, stealing, and cheating.
Manipulation.
Withholding information.
Lying, telling lies.
So that was a full minute and 20 seconds of a video that's still on YouTube to this day of essentially a group of black people slandering white people as evil oppressors, degenerates, killers, murderers, things like that. Very, very unflattering things to hear from one side of the aisle. Now, you would think that in a normal society that we would, denounce things like this, because these are the type of things that cause people to hate one another, and letting stuff like that grow on one side is only going to essentially grow a hatred from the other side. But if you watch a lot of, like I said, Johnny talked about it perfectly, in the media, you watch a lot of 24-hour news channels, they're preaching the same thing on there. You watch a lot of modern TV shows, it's the same thing there. A lot of modern movies, which I've reviewed endlessly here on this show, you see the same thing in there as well. So it's creating and normalizing a hatred of one group of people. Now you think that, if you're essentially attacking a group of people enough, that eventually there's going to be pushback to this. Now, of course, they only go after the pushback and not essentially the people who actually started the initial hatred in the first place here. But I'm pretty sure some of you guys may have heard the name of Nick Fuentes before. He's a figure of more of the far right who goes on based on white politics and goes after the black community, Hispanic community, homosexual community. He's been labeled a Nazi sympathizer by parts of the media because he's sympathetic to views of Adolf Hitler. I'm not saying that he's not. I'm just saying that, this is where he's portrayed. And he's viewed in a lot of people's eyes as essentially the counterbalance and the counter argument here against a lot of the race-based political political sphere that you see being portrayed in the media based on videos just like that. And Don't Let It Speak says, well-trained commie, so sad now. Who's the race? Yeah, so that's another thing too. And like I said, I'm pretty sure we'll have to do an entire episode based on this because I'm only giving you guys a small window of this here, but there's a lot of very troubling things coming from that side of the aisle that we'll have to talk about on a future show here. But here's, like I said, this is kind of your counteractor to this one. Here you have a guy like Nick Fuentes who's like, let's actually talk about some other issues within the black community since they're attacking us, and these are the things that get condemned in the media on one side but not on the other. But here you go.
I don't believe in democracy. I do not believe in universal suffrage. I don't support women's rights. I don't support LGBT rights. I believe in race and gender essentialism. I'm Catholic. I'm a Catholic reactionary. I believe that organized Jewry is extremely influential in the United States. We need to go back to burning women alive more. The Jews had better start being nice to people like us, because what comes out of this is going to be a lot uglier and a lot worse for them than anything that's being said on this show or has been said on this show. These left-wing people, in their heart of hearts, they know they're wrong because, they know that black people are violent. I will say, hey, black people are violent, and then they'll go, I bet you wouldn't say that in front of a black person. Why? Because they're a thug that'll hit me? Hitler was a German statesman. Not even joking this much, I would prefer Taliban rule in America to this. You want to know why? Because at least if black people were fighting at the airport, they would get their hands cut off.
Yeah, so there's another interesting video. A lot of flattering things being said there on both sides. Now, look, I know a lot of people are going to have a lot of opinions on this one. Keep in mind, we're not making this a debate about Nick Fuentes and the black community or about black people hating white people. We're just showing you guys another illustration of this is another avenue, which is a very, very effective avenue to get people to hate one another, and is using race as a justification of creating hate, because you have a lot of people, bunch of people we just played on the video here, who genuinely believe that their hatred of another race of people is completely justified by the actions of that other group. And you have people who are, like I said, they're not loving their neighbor, and they're not trying to, uphold their labor or turn the other cheek or anything like that. They believe, nope, we're in a war right now, and the only way I can contribute to this war is to slander the other side, to bring down the other side, to show everyone, to expose exactly just how evil this side is. And this is causing a lot of dissension and hatred in the streets here. There's plenty of videos that I can show you guys on social media. Sam, you brought it up earlier about these accounts now that are now creating videos or showcasing content here of people just violently attacking one another in the streets, whether it's white people attacking black people attacking white people. Some from them go as further like show like murder and stuff like this. And this is only fueling more and more hatred, because now when people see the videos on social media, whether it be these 30-second clips, these minute-long clips of violence being done against one another, violence being done against one community to another, all that's going to make people think is like, see, we're justified. There's another example of it happening right there. Everything that I've been saying to you is true. And they dig their heels even deeper into racial hatred. And what we're trying to let you guys know here is that it doesn't matter which side of you're on, which side you think is justified. Racial hatred is racial hatred, and then you're both going to be condemned the same way at the end of the day. This is what we're trying to get people to wise up to, is that you can believe that you're justified in hating this person and disliking this person and smearing this person, bearing false witness against the other person, things of that nature. But at the end of the day, as much as you guys hate each other, if you don't repent of what you guys are doing, you're all going to the same destination, and neither one of you are going to enjoy it when you get there. So this is kind of like the light that we're trying to show here, that there's a lot of ways to get angry at one another here, but you know who's pulling the strings when it comes to all of this. We've made it very clear who's pulling the strings here. You can't fall for the trap. You can't fall for the game, because if you do, he's going to win at the end of the day, and then you're going to be the one stuck in eternity away from God because you didn't hear God's words, even during a time of great tribulation and great time, which you can argue is probably going on right now, but definitely hasn't occurred in 70 AD like some of the preterists out there believe. But but like I said, this is just, it's a window of our world right now. And that's just a very small window based on the two videos that I showed you here. Like I said, this is definitely going to be a topic for a future conversation. We can go more in depth in exactly the issues going on here, but this is certainly one that's engulfing the world, especially engulfing the United States of America right here. So Sam, I'll go ahead and spin this over to you. What do you think is the best ways for people to try to not get caught in this trap of hating one another? Because it's very easy to get caught in that trap. I mean, it doesn't matter which side you're on. You can watch either the Nick Fuentes video or the video from The Cut and be like, you know what? I hate what this good person is saying. I hate everything that this person stands for. And it's very easy to essentially join into the hatred, because that's essentially what these videos are trying to do. They're trying to provoke you into anger, right? And so what do you think is the best way as a Christian to avoid being provoked into anger, avoid being provoked into hatred, like a lot of these pundits and videos are trying to get you to do?
As a Christian, I'd say probably stay uninvolved. Not that people aren't going to come to you with these things and ask for an opinion on it. But taking in this stuff, and we talked about this with coveting last week, like taking in this stuff is probably not the healthiest thing to do as a Christian, because it's only going to kind of build the rage behind it. In general, I think there's too much focus on it. Like, this conversation is happening because this conversation is happening so much. Morgan Freeman once said, the best way to get rid of racism is to stop talking about it. And he's black, so he knows what he's talking about. So, yeah, I don't know. I just think that not making it the focus of conversation is probably huge. Also, after I said that, I can probably never run for politics, so thank God I didn't want to.
There's somebody else on our show who's trying to run for office, so it's like, you need to stop appearing on this show if you actually think you have any shot whatsoever in being in politics. So yeah, you probably should give it up. But Johnny, what's kind of your advice for Christians struggling with, they know the Bible says love their neighbor. They know the Bible says, be kind to your enemies, but it's very hard for them to shake off that anger when they see so much of this stuff going on in the world. Like, what's your best advice for them to kind of step away and try to follow God and not try to follow the world?
In the realm of politics specifically, I think it's helpful to recognize that everyone getting divided based on these like measures of identity, whether that's race, gender, wealth, what have you, is just kind of divide and conquer, like ruling strategy. Whether you want to look at it as it's the U.S. government or the global elites, like executing this divide and conquer plan that essentially seeks to pit all these different groups against each other. So you can't actually address the real problem that like the elites or the US government or Satan is corrupt and is actually the one causing the problems.
Mm-hmm.
I think realizing that it's when you get angry, you're just getting played.
Yeah.
You're just playing into this divide and conquer machine that Satan is using to control the world right now.
It's one of those things too where like I said, I'm talking to someone who struggled with this myself, who has been in these trenches before, and the best way that I can try to give people advice of how to counteract stuff like this is really what Sam was saying earlier. Like, you got to be able to just step away from it. Like, and I know it's hard for people to kind of like take a step back and pull yourself away from this political trap and from like these race traps and gender and all this other stuff. But I think the problem is that after a while, if you get stuck in the rabbit hole too much, then you're going to end up losing any sight of who you were beforehand, because you're just going to get so engulfed into being so emotionally driven. And a good point here, we're talking about Anna Kasperi, and she was essentially slamming her critics, saying that, oh, well, she's saying that, people saying that I'm too emotional, and then she just goes on like a big emotional rant. After a while, you have to realize that, at a certain point, you are being too emotional and invested in this. Especially at the end of the day, you're not really going to change anything one way or another. Because if you think that going on like Twitter, for instance, or I'm sorry, X as it's called now, is essentially doing anything to like solve the problem, all you're doing is just feeding into the anger machine. All you're doing is essentially falling into the discord and strife and attacking people, attacking one another. And you can argue that, especially a platform like Twitter, in of its inception, that's really kind of the end game of that platform, is to keep people divided and keep people angry at one another or hot at one another or always arguing with one another. It's like, I can't tell you how many times I've been dragged into Twitter disputes with someone where I'm spending like days arguing with this person, not realizing that if I continue this argument, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to change anyone's mind. I'm not going to. You're not going to win any spiritual debates. You're not going to win any political debates. It's basically just one giant waste of time. And like I said, you have to kind of look back and understand that all of these things are temptations in one way, shape, or form than another. And it's hard to resist temptation. It's very, very difficult to resist temptation. If it wasn't difficult, we wouldn't be human. Let's just put it that way. If we can easily be like Jesus and say no, then we wouldn't have as many problems as we have right now. But we are dealing with the flesh, and in many ways we're dealing with powers and principalities as well. So this isn't going to be an easy fight, but it's one fight that we have to realize that there's a end game here that we should fight as Christians. But getting into these petty disputes with brethren, brothers, enemies, the such, it's just going to be one giant waste of time for us. And all this is doing is pulling us away from God and drawing God's disappointment and anger as a result of it. And we have to be smart enough to realize when we're being played, just like Johnny said there. So. But of course, this isn't the only form of political division that we have on here. Obviously, another form of division is the whole issue with the LGBTQ community. Now, like I said, this is another one that we're probably going to have to do on a future episode, because this is much bigger than we could talk about in the time frame of here. But I'm pretty sure you guys have heard the name Dylan Mulvaney, and in the course of the last few months, this is the person who's being celebrated by the media, who's come out as transgender, I guess. She's dressing as a woman woman now, talking about doing all of these feminine things that clearly not really doing, because you're still a guy at the end of the day. I hate to break that to you. I know that's probably a violation of YouTube's terms and service to say that, sorry, you're not a woman just because you shave your legs and put on makeup and put on a dress here. But this person is obviously, especially at the earlier part of the year, like, people really hated this person because he was just going out there making a mockery of gender, making a mockery of women, and it caused a lot of backlash, just to say the least here. This is a little bit of what we've had to deal with earlier this year with Dylan Mulvaney. I think Jason Whitlock probably has some great commentary about this too, so I'll just play this video here.
Who gets facial hair, and that is absolutely okay, but I have to shave my face every day, so I'm using the EOS Sensitive Shave Cream to protect my skin and get a close shave. Bikini reveal in 3, 2, 1. I'm feeling silky smooth and confident thanks to EOS. Love ya!
You are getting facial hair because you're a boy, okay? Bikini reveal, or what we'd rather say tuck reveal in 3, 2, 1. What kind of duct tape are you using? Too much.
It is a pretty fair assessment of the situation, but it goes into a much deeper conversation here, because this whole thing with the LGBTQ community has really escalated here over the last, I guess you could say 15 years, but it's been going on just a little bit more than that. But it all started a few years ago with the idea of gay marriage, and 20 years ago, this is something that was being pushed. And it's weird to talk about gay marriage in the context of like the early 2000s, because believe it or not, we were slightly more moderate / conservative in the earlier part of the 2000s, not by much, but we were kind of there. And when people were arguing the idea of gay marriage, there were still a lot of people who were against it at the time. But the argument for it at the time was, well, I mean, hey, it's just marriage. Let two people do what they want to do. You know, let two consenting adults get married. If they want to be married and happy, let them. If they want to be married and miserable, let them. It's no big deal. It doesn't concern you. Like, this has no affecting you. And after a while, that argument did kind of win over, especially towards the later part of the decade. People just like slowly start to be like, oh, okay, look, if you guys just want to get married and whatnot, just go ahead and do it. There's no big deal to that. Just go over there and go do what you want to do. And that was kind of the argument that won. Keep in mind, we're talking about at a time, even like it was like 2008, I want to say 2008 or 2010. Even California voted down gay marriage at that time period. So that just goes to show you just how quickly we've moved from one side of the aisle to another, when even California 15 years ago said, no, gay marriage is a little too far for us. So things can change very, very rapidly here. But they got the victory on gay marriage, and then it turned into, hey, we wanted you to make a cake for our gay marriage. And it's like, no, sorry, I'm a Christian, I don't want to do that. It's like, oh, okay, we're going to take you to court. We're going to take you all the way to the Supreme Court because we want you to bake our cake. Remember that whole story that dominated like the 2010s about the one baker who didn't want to do the gay wedding, and they went literally to the Supreme Court to get him to essentially spend years and years in legal fees that could have shut down his business. Now, he eventually won, you know, thank God. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a legal dispute that went on for years. It could have easily shut down somebody else who didn't get, you know, the support and that he had gotten at the time. But this is another issue that came up. And then all of a sudden, the halfway into 2010s, it no longer became about, oh, we just want to get married. Oh, we just want to bake our cake. Now you have to use our pronouns, because I'm a guy, but I feel like I'm a woman. And in order for me to really feel like a woman, I need you to identify me as a woman. So I'm now going to go with she, her pronouns. And I'm going to start going into the women's bathroom. And people are like, okay, wait. We didn't agree to any of this. Where are we going here? And this is the next big fight with the LGBTQ. It's like, let the men dress as women and go into the bathrooms with your women and your daughters and all this whole stuff. And it became a huge mess. And even Barack Obama got in on the action at one point. He condemned, I think it was North Carolina, because they passed a bathroom bill saying that no, actually you can't go into women's bathrooms. And then this became the whole big fight. And on the backs of this, we came, you know, address my pronouns, address my gender identity. And we started getting all of a sudden 200 gender identities, and all of these flags started coming out of nowhere. And very, very quickly, luckily we're like, okay, like what is going on here? Like I thought this whole thing was about marriage, at least we thought. Now we're at this weird location in between. Hey, just let the kids go to the drag queen shows because the drag queen shows are family friendly now. Now people are like, okay, now this is going on with children. Now we have this normalization of quote unquote trans kids, and they want to, have kids be generally mutilated, and they're showing off, young women and young men who want to change their gender, cutting off their breasts, cutting off their penis, and now it's like we're going into like full like degeneracy here. It's like when you read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, people, I just wanted to stress to you that it actually did happen. As much as you want to think that there's some kind of biblical fairy tale of a warning of a worse time, no, these are things that actually did happen. As you can see, we're very quickly circling right back to that whole sin that caused, let's just say, a giant explosion to wipe out that city from the ash. I can only think of some of the things that are going on now that would infer that, but like I said, this is now the next big political battle here, this whole thing with the LGBTQ and everyone else. And we kind of talked about this yesterday in a little Bible study that we did, separate but study, not here on the channel, but another one about, look, there's people out there on the LGBTQ who believe that if you don't affirm their gender identity, if you don't believe who they believe to be as a person, then you're committing violence against them, that you're essentially causing them to commit suicide at a nearly 50% rate. I mean, we're talking about a rate of suicide in the trans community that are higher than people who come back from actual war zones. Like, that's how bad it doesn't change if they get the surgery. If they get the surgery, they're not going to become normal. It only gets significantly worse. So these are obviously problems that need to be addressed. Don't Let It Burn also has a perfect one here. Target has $10 billion in the trans bathroom situation. They didn't care. They lost a lot of money on it. Bud Light obviously lost a lot of money promoting Dylan Mulvaney and things of that nature. So this is kind of the one that's really hard even for Christians to try to not fall for the trap of. And I think it's mainly due to the fact that now they're going after the kids, right? Now they're going after the children. They're trying to normalize these things with, kids as well. I always go back to, I think it's Matthew 18, verse 6, about what Jesus says about causing little ones who believe in him to sin against him. And that's essentially what we're doing now. As they said, it's better to have a large millstone hung around their necks to be drowned in the depths of the seas. And now we have an entire culture, an entire country of people trying to do this. So of all of the ones that we've talked about so far, they may be some of the easier ones to kind of get away from. It's like, hey, just don't worry about, the political based stuff. Don't worry about like the race based stuff. Try to stay away from those. This one's a little harder to stay away from because this one is, like I said, it's affecting people who essentially can't defend themselves. And I think someone knows that these people can't defend themselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and go with you, Sam, on this one. I guess start here. What is your, I guess we can go back to the same question I asked you here before. What is kind of your take on the best way that a Christian to handle the, LGBTQ debate here and not to fall for essentially the hatred that they breed towards people who think like us, obviously, and not to throw back their hatred and their, or their discord of us against them? Like, how do you kind of find a way to stay in their lane and essentially hate the sin but not the sinner in this situation?
See, to me, in a lot of ways, that's a much harder issue than just race, because race is internal. Like, you internalize your hatred.
Mm-hmm.
When you promote or support gender-affirming care, that's external. There are physical consequences that these kids are going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. So I think maybe not falling into the ballpark of tolerance is a big thing. And it's a hard thing. Wait, what? Oh, right. Call back. But yeah, I think not into the category of tolerating it, but also not leading with hate, leading with love, because the reason that we stand against it isn't because it's like, screw you if you do this. It's like, this is, there are lifelong consequences to this. It's a toughie though. I don't know where I stand with, do you accept somebody's pronouns when they tell you I want to go by this or that out of respect, or do you just straight up not play along? My response lately has been to just not deal with it in general. It's just,
it definitely depends on the situation. There's situations that vary. Like, Here's what I've kind of looked at it for too, and it's definitely a tougher problem. Like I said, if this were in California right now, this would be like an absolute nightmare if I was still over here. But this is kind of how I view about it. Is that everything that this movement tries to push, I say go against it wholeheartedly. But if you're actually dealing with someone in more of like a one-on-one basis, and I have dealt with this before. There was a person I used to be a part of the San Diego Republican Party back in like this is gotta be like 5-6 years ago. It was a while back ago, and there was a transgender member of our party, right? And it was kind of like a weird like area, and it wasn't like convincing like at all. It's just like a 60-year-old man dressed as like a woman, right? But in the context of being in that environment at the time, I was just kind of like, look, I'll be respectful to this person. I'm not gonna come out and say like you're a man. Like I'm not gonna come out like fire and brimstone and like just like come all out on this person here. It's like I think there's definitely instances where you can be respectful to some people. Because there's another thing you have to keep in mind too, and this is something that I think that's helped me a lot. It's like when you look at people in the LGBTQ community, and this is something to keep in mind of. These are people who are dealing with a lot of personal trauma in their lives. I mean, this is something that doesn't get talked about. They don't like to talk about this, but these are people who have dealt with sexual abuse in their lifetime, especially in their youth. These are people who have dealt with physical abuse in their lifetime, especially in their youth. There's people who have dealt with, body issues and things of that nature. So they already have a mindset that the entire world is against them, right? So when it comes to people who are, I guess, being duped by this whole situation, the ones that are buying into this ideology because they come from a broken home and they feel like this community is their only sense of like family, I think there's a much different approach to have to them, because there is still a possibility that you can essentially talk to these people, have kind of a one-on-one with them that could probably bring them back. So I have seen a lot of people come back around from this ideology and regret the things that they were involved with. Those are people who are more misled than completely gone. So I do think there's still a chances up there to, I guess, try to witness to those people and talk to those people. Now, you also have the people out there who know exactly what they're doing and know exactly how deceptive they are. And these are the people who you really just can't have any communion with, like, whatsoever. I mean, what is the note in like I think is it Ephesians where it says don't fellowship with darkness but rather than expose it. I think it's Ephesians off the top of my head, but I'll figure that one out here. But it's the idea that people who knowingly are doing evil, people who know kind of the mentality of the game, and they're purposely trying to deceive people, they're purposely trying to push an agenda because they're essentially working for evil in that aspect. I think those people, like I said, the best way to handle them is just to completely disassociate with them altogether. Cut them off in any aspect of your life if you have to, because those are the ones that are doing the great evil and great disservice to everyone involved, and nothing good is gonna come from even being associated with those people. So I think that it really works on a case-by-case basis. There are people out there who I think are just generally lost and are looking for direction, who are more open to I guess kindliness. And if you're going to be a Christian, you have to remember this too. It's like when you're going out there and you think that you want to hate these people or want to be angry at these people, at the same time, being a Christian means that you're one of the few beacons of light there is out there in the world, and you have to show people something different than what they've experienced before. Because if there's a person out there that has a preconceived notion that Christians are evil and that they hate them and that they want nothing to do with them, if they actually meet someone who isn't what the world has told them the Christians are, that in and of itself could be like the flip of the switch to be like, well, I thought that you were just like the worst person in the entire world, and you've actually been one of the few people who were actually like kind to me. Maybe that'll be the jump off point to somebody say, okay, maybe all these things that I bought into is in fact a lie. Maybe all these things that I bought into is in fact removing me from the truth. So I think it's very difficult. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's easy, but I do think that there's ways to address it, but it has to go by the situation and the person that you're dealing with. There's times to be compassionate, and then there's at times to be like absolutely, we need to put our foot down against this, especially when it comes to the whole trans like children situation. I think we absolutely need to put our foot down against that whole agenda and anyone who supports that agenda, because you're talking about mutilating kids' bodies for the rest of their lives, then they're never going to recover from that mutilation, and that's what's going to drive them to the suicide. They want to say like, oh, well, you're not affirming their he, she pronouns, and that's what's going to make them kill themselves. No, the fact that they sterilized themselves and mutilated themselves at the age of like 15, and now they're like 20, and they no longer identify with that, and they realize they did irreparable damage to their body, and there's nothing they can do to fix it, that what causes people to kill themselves. And those are the people who need the compassion the absolute most to keep them alive and keep them off that ledge. So I know that was a little bit long-winded there with that answer, but I was just trying to give the best description of the problem, or at least the solution to the problem that I can describe. Johnny, what's your general feelings of how we should treat the I'll say put it this way, how do you think we should treat the LGBTQ movement versus actually the people who are in this movement?
Well, I don't think we should be encouraging that behavior, whether it's in the movement or if you're talking to a specific person, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, we need to like love them, you know, and that means being kind. That means not being rude to them, but it also means not like, you know, 1 Corinthians 13:6 says, love does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. And so I don't know if you want to take that as far as not, you know, like kind of conforming to their pronoun preferences or what have you. I personally probably wouldn't. I wouldn't call them by the wrong pronouns. I would kind of just use their name a lot, you know. But it is a tough situation. I think we are responsible for speaking out against the movement, though. Like you know, our Sunday school class went to that board of commissioners meeting because they were having like a drag show in our county, and a bunch of people from our class like went and spoke out against that, and I think it was the right thing to do, because that drag show ended up getting canceled, and like a lot of children didn't get encouraged by that behavior, you know.
Yeah. And that's the important thing too. It's like there's times for compassion, but like I said, I also would not go into affirming like any of their beliefs as well either, because like I said, very important in the Bible, you don't want to bear false witness, right? And guess what? Claiming that someone is a different gender that they're not, and you know they're not, also falls within that category as well. And I think this is probably like a good example of this. I'll go ahead and pray this here. This is a video from Nicholas Bowling, if you guys want to check out his video. But this is kind of the way that he, a situation that happened at a recent LGBTQ festival that he dealt with. And it really goes to show you that as many people out there that are going to yell at you, that are going to be angry at you and things like that, there are people who are willing to listen. And this is probably the best way to handle people who are willing to listen, and you might get a breakthrough with them. So I'll go ahead and play this just real quick.
Is this your girlfriend?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, this is just my dude friend. I just met him today.
Okay.
Right here.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah. She's back at her house. She couldn't come today.
Gotcha.
Sadly.
Okay. So I was asking her the thing that you said, I can't even pronounce it, but it makes you feel like you don't like yourself, you hate yourself. You ever feel like anything tells you to like harm yourself, it's not worth living, things like that?
Some therapy at one point.
Yeah. So Jesus came to set you free from all that, and to like he said, to heal you from all that. We're going to pray for you today, and what it is it's God revealing his love for you and his compassion for you, and that he wants to have a relationship with you. He wants you to have the best life that you can, and he wants you to spend all of eternity in a perfect place with him. So we're going to pray for you, and God's going to set you free. But I will tell you, things like this, they try to come back. But the way that they try to come back, so you see that you're not stronger than it, right? Because if you could overcome it yourself, you wouldn't be dealing with it, right? So Jesus is way stronger than it. So you're going to be healed, and then afterwards, if you accept Jesus and you say thank you, and you say, Jesus, I want you to help me, and I want you to keep this away from me, then he'll come with you and he'll do that. But if you
So I just wanted to show just a little bit of that. I will put the video so you can watch it on your full time here. But it's basically an idea, like I said, you're having people there who are troubled, but who are willing to listen. And when you have a rare opportunity like that, then yeah, there is a moment where you can witness to somebody and who's like I said, willing to listen. Maybe they are going through like a rough time. Maybe there is something still within them that's pulling away. Maybe their soul isn't completely corrupted by Satan just yet. There is a moment that they can break away from their sins and break away from their lifestyle changes there. And like I said, it definitely varies on the person, because I think we've all seen the type of people who, as much as we don't want to say that no person can be saved, I think there's a lot of people who we see that person may be a little bit too far away from redemption, but there are people out there who are close too. There are people out there who are just hurting, and I think it's important to recognize that there are those people out there. As much as we despise a lot of the things that are being taught by this culture, we do also have to recognize that there are people who are just simply deceived by it, who aren't exactly the ones pushing it to begin with. So don't spare the anger of the people who are the ones pushing it versus the ones who are just simply deceived by it, because it's the ones who are deceived by it, there's still a chance that they can pull them back in the right direction. And like I said, that's kind of the whole idea of Christianity in and of itself. It's like Jesus is the shepherd, and sheep are going to go astray, but you got to go back and you got to pull that sheep back into the right camp at the end of the day. That's kind of the idea of why we're still here, is to bring the sheep back to the truth of Christ. So like I said, very difficult situation. I know we'll have to do a future episode, talk about this more in depth, because there's just a lot of angles to talk about here with that one, but that's just kind of like a small window of that whole story here. And we're going to do one more topic here for the end of the night, because this is actually going to lead us on to our next week's topic, which I'm not telling you right now because it's not that time for the teaser yet. But this is the other very powerful tool of division that we're seeing right now, and I'm pretty sure you've all witnessed it. It is the division between men and women. And this is something that has been very, very heavy, especially over the last few years now, over the whole age of Me Too. If you guys don't recall Me Too, because maybe you're not movie buffs, so you don't really know how Hollywood works, but it has been a badly kept secret over many, many years that there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who sleep their way to the top. I know, shocker. Some of the favorite actresses that you guys may have slept with like 10 different producers to get where they are right now and to get their awards. Just kind of the way that it is. But a lot of producers take advantage of this, and there are super creepers. One of them just happens to be Harvey Weinstein, who slept with many actresses, both willingly and unwillingly. And after a while, he got exposed. Now, this is a guy who a lot of people hadn't heard of until 2016, 2017, when the whole Me Too thing happened. But this is a guy who everyone knew in Hollywood for decades. Like, even a show like Entourage, if you remember HBO's Entourage, they were lampooning Harvey Weinstein in like 2005. This is like a decade before the whole expose. So anyone tries in the business who tries to pretend like, oh, we had no idea what he was doing, is like, they're lying to you. They're absolutely lying to you. But that whole thing with Harvey Weinstein and him getting exposed created the Me Too movement, which was that, oh, well, we live in the world that is controlled by the patriarchy, that's controlled by men, so we need to use this moment and use this movement to dethrone the rule of men, to dethrone the rule of masculinity, and bring in the rule of the matriarchy, the movement of the strong, independent woman, etc., etc. And as a result of this, we have seen a lot of hatred in the media being directed at men at the behest of women. I wrote this article earlier this year, actually. This is actually, what was this one? This is back in July. This is like late July. So this is like 3 months ago. And as someone who has been reviewing a lot of movies, as you guys know on the show, I do a lot of movie reviews here. You probably even talked about some of these movies. This is an article I wrote back then called The Top 10 Most Misandrous Films of the Me Too Era. These are films that, keep in mind, have only come out in like the last 6 or 7 years, that each and every one of them has some kind of angle where they're attacking men. So I'm just going to go through a quick little run through here of some of these films. Charlie's Angels was a film that came out. Charlie's Angels Ruby. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen any of this, but I'm just giving you guys a quick rundown here. If you notice, like, okay, well, how do these movies like suddenly attack men? You notice how men are portrayed in these films, how they're almost usually all the bad guys. So all the villains in these movies are usually men. They make very, very sexist comments towards women. They're always like the attackers. They're always the aggressors. They always like catcalling women and harassing women, sometimes even raping women. It's all very negative portrayals of men all around. If you watch She-Hulk last year, and Spencer, who's probably still listening right now, knows all about She-Hulk because he had to edit all those reviews that I did last year. That's a textbook example of a show that just goes out of its way to portray men negatively and to portray women positively. We're going to continue here. That's a film that does it. The Woman King. This was a movie from last year about a group of female warriors who were trying to attack the white slave owners. Now, this movie completely whitewashed, unironically, the real history of the violent African slave traders that many white people to this day are being blamed about, the transatlantic slave trade. But in this film, no, the black women who were cutting off the heads of their own villagers in the 1800s. No, they're the good guys here. So, yeah, that's how we pervert history. Last Night in Soho, you guys may not know this movie. This is a movie that I liked up until the ending, and the ending was dumb because, once again, you had a woman here who was essentially trying to sleep with men to get a role in Hollywood. It didn't pan out. She just became a prostitute. So she started killing her Johns, and at the very end of the movie, the conclusion here is that, well, the Johns deserved it because they took advantage of her, so they let her go free. And
that wasn't what pissed me off, but in all fairness, this movie was really good for about 75% of it.
I feel the exact same way. And like I said the exact same thing. Like, this was a good movie up until that revelation because you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here. And then when they reveal the mystery to you, it's like, oh.
It's like, how this sucks.
Yeah, not good. Number 7 here. Don't Worry, Darling. This is a movie that we reviewed here on the show. That review is still up here on our YouTube channel. Me, Rick, and Rob did that one. The whole setup of this movie, Olivia Wilde, who, keep in mind, in real life, slept with her co-star while making this movie, and then got served custody papers from her husband or boyfriend that she broke up with during the whole filming of this, and then tried to lie on Shia LaBeouf while making a movie about attacking the patriarchy, all ironically enough. She made a movie about the 1950s, a film that's supposedly set in the 1950s, where women are essentially the housewives of men who work during the day and they can live a nice, comfy life. Turns out the whole thing is a lie. The women have been kidnapped because the men wanted to be happy with their girlfriends or their wives, and they weren't happy, so they decided to create an alternative reality where they could be happy, and the men were the bad guys. I think the takeaway from this film is that if you're a woman and you're working 60 hours at a hospital and you're absolutely miserable with your life, it's better to choose that than to be a happy housewife. So very odd messaging for that film, but that was a film that came out last year, bombed. Black Christmas 2019. This is a film that made me apologize to the 2006 version of Black Christmas, which I thought was one of the worst movies that I've ever seen. Same thing here. A lot of men bad, rape culture, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, this is just completely unnecessary and stupid. So I'm just throwing that out there as well. Hansel and Gretel. Now, this is where... This is the movie Gretel and Hansel, I should say. This is a movie where not only was the messaging here very, very disturbing, but it was very, very satanic. You had this woman here and her younger brother who were trying to survive on their own, and they were being chased around by a literal satanic witch. And for some reason, the witch becomes like a mother figure to this girl who tells her that she needs to give up her brother, give up her family, give up her essentially her de facto child in order to reach her potential. This is something that we hear a lot from the feminist movement that, hey, if you're a mother, being a mother is only holding you back from your true potential. You can't go out there and get a career job if you have a kid. So just go ahead and get rid of that kid so that you can unlock your true potential. And they put that message in this movie, and it's very, very disturbing. Do not recommend it. Oh yeah, I watched it. All right, and I have a very lengthy review about it. That's on societyreviews.com too. So not great. Chaos Walking. This is another film here starring Tom Holland, aka Spider-Boy, and Daisy Ridley, aka Britface from Star Wars. So this movie is about living on a planet where all the women can hear the men's thoughts, but the men can't hear the women's thoughts. So the men don't like the fact that the women can hear their thoughts, so they kill all the women. So, and that's the film.
That movie was very bad, I will say.
Yeah, it made my top 10 worst list of the year. I'm not sure exactly what number it was, but I think it was in the top 5. So it was not good.
100 writers who didn't communicate with each other. It was very confusing.
Yep. Barbie. This one just came out a few months ago. Now, despite the fact that Sider will go to his grave claiming that this is actually a men's rights movie, making Ken the good guy in this whole story. And if you guys know Sider, you can ask him about it on the bar room tomorrow night. But this one was all about Barbie overcoming the patriarchy. Like, literally, the whole plot of this film is that they go to the real world for like 10 minutes. And then somehow in that course of that 10 minutes, Ken brings the patriarchy home to Barbie Land. And then Barbie Land basically becomes like a Buffalo Wild Wings, where like all the Barbies are like arm candy to the men. So, of course, the Barbies and the real girls have to come in and beat the patriarchy before the Kens can change the Constitution to permanently make Barbie Land Ken Land. And that's just kind of on the surface level of this film. There's a lot more disturbing things about this film for the most part. The whole thing of how it views relationships between men and women, the whole idea of patriarchy and matriarchy, and the fact that in the very like first like minute of the film, you have a bunch of like young girls violently smashing dolls of babies down because they no longer have to be mothers anymore. They can be their own women. So a lot of it's just a complete inversion of the Book of Genesis too, if you really want to get down into it. But there's a whole bunch of things with this movie that are just not good, so I don't recommend it at all. Unpregnant. Now, this is a movie that I've talked about a few times here on these streams. This is one of the movies that got censored twice on Letterboxd. Letterboxd did not like my review of this movie. Here's the setup. This is at the time when they were doing the heartbeat bills across the United States. So the setup here is that a girl gets pregnant by her boyfriend. The boyfriend wants to keep the baby, wants to actually step up and be a father, but she doesn't want to have the kid because she wants to go out to some university. So she gets her fat, non-binary best friend to go on a road trip with her so they can go kill the baby. He proposes to her. She takes the ring, pawns his ring so that she can pay for the road trip to go to New Mexico and get the abortion. And then when he tries to stop her, because keep in mind, he actually wants to be a father to this child, the black female pawn shop owner pulls a gun out on him and threatens to kill him for trying to stop her from getting the abortion. And that's like just one of the glowing red flags about this movie. This is a movie that was very popularized. Like I said, this is supposed to be the answer to the heartbeat bills to protect unborn children from abortion in a lot of states. And they thought that, oh, if we create this film, this is going to encourage a lot of women out there to get abortions, to be pro-abortion. Had the complete opposite effect. Had an absolutely terrible movie, one of the worst movies I've seen in the last few years. And then, of course, you have Widows. This is just rolling everything that we've talked about in this show so far into one movie. Divides by race, divides by class, divides by politics. All kinds of things are in this movie. A bunch of women have to do like some kind of a heist because the men who they were involved with died, and now it's all up to them to pay off their debts. And it's very, very anti-male in its core. Everything, it divides them basically everything that you can think of. Every man in the film is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a white beater, incest. There's cheaters, murderers, creeps, politicians. Like, if you're a man in this movie, you're not going to be viewed very kindly in this film. And if you are viewed kindly in the film, you're probably going to die. That's modern Hollywood in a nutshell. So all of this stuff is the things that Hollywood and the media has presented to people as a counterculture, quote unquote, to the patriarchal culture. So a lot of people are noticing here that, man, men are just really having it like pretty bad like right now, and there's really nobody out there, especially in the mainstream media, that's speaking out for men's rights. Well, that's when you end up getting wolves in sheep's clothing like Andrew Tate, who a lot of young men have started to gravitate towards because he's really the only guy out there who's actively sticking up for men against a lot of these things. So a lot of people are now gravitating to Andrew Tate and his teachings. We've talked about Andrew Tate a couple of times on this podcast. Even last week we talked about him. Not exactly something I would want to follow as far as like, you know, the ideal male. I know Sam is doing the Andrew Tate pose right now, so she knows very much about this character, but just throwing this out here. Here's a video of Andrew Tate. Now, this is a message that is apparently getting a lot of men to move over to his side, which should be worrying enough of itself. But just listen to what he's saying.
What do you say to young men who come to you for advice, who feel lost, who don't really know where they fit into society?
I say that life as a man is exceptionally difficult. I say the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing about being a man is you're born without value. Society doesn't care about you. You're only going to be cared about based on how useful you are. You have the chance to build yourself up and become a superhero if you're prepared to do the hard work and be indefatigable enough to never quit. But if you're going to stand around and wait for a handout, nobody's going to ever respect you. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten about how difficult and how competitive it is as a man. We're always in constant competition with each other. And it's your duty as a man to stand up and say, I want to be as important and strong and good-hearted and God-fearing as possible, and I need to work hard to achieve those things. Masculine men have a duty to provide and protect those they care about. We have a duty to do things we don't feel like doing because we know we're supposed to do them. And that's why we stayed in the Titanic and died. We need to be teaching young men to understand that the world is very, very difficult. It's hard to be a man. You're going to feel bad sometimes. You just suck it up and perform anyway. Not just sit there and cry your eyes out or blame other people.
Tough being a woman too in modern society.
It's certainly tough being a woman, but I'm not a woman, so why would I speak on issues I do not understand? I'm a man. Because every man deals with heartbreak and deals with sadness, but how you use that energy is the differentiator between humans, right? You are feeling the same pain that many men have felt. I, as a man, every man out there has had his heart broken and understands how difficult it is as a man. We all know how hard it is to see the girl you love getting plowed. Yeah, getting plowed by someone else, like you have to deal with now. You can log into our OnlyFans and see it. The difference between me and you, and perhaps some of the other men out there, is that certain men take that anguish and take that sadness and understand that energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be converted, and use it to build themselves into a man of absolute standing and power. As a man.
Now, a lot of that might sound good on this face service, but what's actually happening here, and Awesome One jumped on the head of the gun here, is that what is happening is because you've had this aggressive, radical feminist movement that has grown in popularity in the media over the last few years, is that, well, if you have one reaction, you have to have the opposite reaction, and the opposite reaction has been what's been called the MGTOW community. And the MGTOW community is a group of men, young men, older men, who have essentially given up on women altogether, who believe that, all women are bad, there's no good women out there, so they've given up on the idea of marriage because they just see marriage as a means for a woman to screw over a man. They've given up on relationships, and they've gone so far off the deep end the other way. We're talking about, on the one side, you have women who just hate men and hate any possible portrayal of men. Then on the other side, you have men who just hate women and hate any positive portrayal of women. And essentially what this has done is that this has created a great divide for both men and women, especially in times that we have now. I mean, pretty sure you've heard people talk about this in the past, that relationships are down, that marriages are down. People aren't getting into relationships now. People aren't getting into marriages now. It's because both sides are coming into it with very jaded views of the opposite sex, and it's keeping both of them apart, which is a problem. Now, I do agree that, look, there's a lot of guys out there, you probably shouldn't marry those guys. Same time, there's a lot of women out there, you probably shouldn't marry those women. And I think it's more important to find the right person out there rather than jump into a bad relationship that you're going to end up regretting, especially when children become involved, and now you're talking about alimony and child support. And this is what drives the divide in the first place. But the whole idea that, yes, there are bad men and bad women out there, I'm not going to go as far as say that the entire institution of marriage is bad in and of itself, because what did God say? Be fruitful and multiply, right? And Satan knows that, so what he's done is that he's created such a divide between men and women that they can't possibly get together and do that anymore, because there's so much animosity and hatred between those two. And I want to hold that part of the conversation just for here for a moment, because it's going to go into what we're going to talk about next week when we follow in on this in more detail. But let me go ahead and shoot this over to you. I'll start with Sam. We'll get the female's opinion on this whole thing, on the whole divide between men and women. You have, like I said, this radical feminist movement for women that is driving them away from men. You have this MGTOW movement that's driving men away from women, and it's causing a divide. It's causing a hatred on both sides. What's kind of your take on this split, on this divide, and what do you think we can do to counteract this aspect of our discord?
Yeah, I think gender identity is a whole mess right now. For example, men are a lot better at women at a lot of things, or are a lot better than women at a lot of things. And I'm not saying that because I'm an asshole. Sorry. I'm saying that because that's kind of just the reality of, like, the physical makeup of what men are. So if you've got men that are claiming to be women, beating women at things and claiming to be women, they're going to be better than women at those things. So that's part of the divide, is you're not allowed to say that's not okay, because then you're a bigot. So part of it is people are being silenced. The other part of it is I don't know. I think sex is just a lot more accessible, so people don't see eye to eye. Like that's not like a, I don't know.
It certainly hasn't helped.
Yeah, yeah. So there's so many factors here. I really just don't know where to begin. I guess our buddy Andrew Tate covered a lot of it, but I'm gonna pass this one off to Johnny.
Mm-hmm. The ball has been passed in your court, Johnny. Same question. What's your take on the hyper-feminist MGTOW divide, and how we can work on breaking this divide between men and women?
How can we work on breaking the divide between men and women? I think Sam started going down this path, but I think we need to, like have men and women just go back to their natural roles in society. One of the things with the radical feminism that kind of discourages families and marriage in general is like involving women in the workforce. And that's not necessarily like, I'm not saying women shouldn't have the right to work, but
we shouldn't.
we also need people to take care of, kids and educate kids, especially like now as our public schools have become indoctrination chambers. We need people at home kind of, doing the other jobs that our society needs to function and grow,
Yeah. I think Kate brought up a good point here, is that, and this is something that really just shows you just the evil influences in our society as well, because it really does come down to like marriage. Like I think every reasonable good woman wants to find a good husband, and every reasonable good husband or good man wants to find a good woman to make his wife. But I think there's so many other factors outside of just the vow that you make with God that has complicated marriage, especially in this country where there's so many other legal factors that are now involved here too. Because like I said, a lot of guys are looking at it from the perspective of, well, I'm taking the bigger financial risk here. If we were to get divorced for whatever reason the case may be, I'm losing half my money. I have to pay child support. So it's like I have to be like super duper careful about who I marry now, or else I'm going to be on the short end of the stick here. I think a lot of women also struggle with this too, is because I think the world is telling, especially nowadays, that oh well, you just need to go out there and have your fun and whatnot, and go out there in the world with like all of these guys, and they're going after guys who don't really respect them or value them at all, and then they're going to get to a point where, okay, I do want to settle down and find that guy who I can like love and have children with. That guy's now looking at them, it's like, nah, I actually don't want to have anything to do with you now, and then that's causing divide and hatred too. And this is something that I've heard a lot over the last few years. These women who have bought into the idea of feminism to a point where, oh, I slept with 35 guys, or I've slept with over 100 guys, and now I want to settle down and be like a church wife. And everyone's all like, yeah, no. This is essentially what you're dealing with here. I mean, a lot of guys, I think it was a stat not too long ago that said that if a woman has slept with like more than like, I think the number was like 8 people like in her lifetime or something like that, that the chances of them getting a divorce if she gets married are like 80% or some crazy number there. And I think what that displays is that if someone, like I said, this can go for men and women too, because I know a lot of women are like, well, wait a second, guys sleep with a lot of guys. There's some guys that do, there's some guys that don't. But if you've slept with that many people in your lifetime, what that shows is that you have a fundamental problem with commitment in any way, shape, or form, which means that the second that you get tired of someone, the second that your relationship or whatever you guys are doing is not exciting anymore, then you'll go find somebody else. And that means that the problem of commitment is essentially with you. If you're going from one person to another, to another, to another, you're not going to find happiness that way. And the more you try to fight that, the deeper into unhappiness that you're going to get. And look, we got a growing divide of men and women right now. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago too, how especially with the younger generation, you have men who you can say are in the Andrew Tate camp who are becoming more and more conservative, but you have women on the opposite side who are falling more into the feminism camp, who are becoming more and more liberal. And because, as we've talked about throughout the course of this entire night, politics has now become the most divisive thing in our country right now. You have two sides that are diametrically opposed to everything the other side stands for. and they're not going to make good mates. They're not going to make good lovers. They're not going to make good partners. They're not going to make good parents. So both of these sides in one shape or form and another are going their own separate ways. And what that's going to end up causing is that marriage rates are going to go down. Birth rates are going to go down, and it's going to lead to a very, very ugly future here unless we figure something out and figure something out fast. I don't know if we can do that. My advice that I've always given on as far as like the men's side is a lot of men will look at certain women and think to themselves like, oh, well, she's a whore or she's been run through and I don't want to find like women like that. Then at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, someone out there is spending, hundreds of dollars a month on a woman's OnlyFans or a woman's Twitch account and something like that. And essentially you're out there promoting the problem. You're out there promoting the problem. It's like, okay, these women are out there being loose, but it's like somebody out there is funding them. Somebody out there is making the problem worse. And guess what? It's a lot of you men who are doing this. So what I would say is stop chasing women who will not be good mothers to your children, who will not be good wives. Stop trying to find someone who you just want to sleep with for 10 minutes and then go on about your day. Like, that's a big part of the problem that we popularized throughout, you could say, the 60s, definitely. Again, in the 90s and like the 2000s, is the whole idea of hookup culture. I'm just going to sleep with as many people as I possibly can. And then at some point later in my life, I'm going to settle down and be the person that I envisioned myself being when I was 7 years old. Because once you've gone through the Rolodex here, you get to a point where your options are pretty limited. You're not going to find the guy or the girl that you want to find. And that's going to cause a problem for you. So I would tell people, stop listening to what the world tells you that you should be, both men and women, because what the world is telling you is not what God is telling you. And if you start listening to the world, the more you're listening to God, you're going to be very, very miserable and very, very unhappy in your life with the direction that your life is going to go. And that's pretty much the reality of the situation here. And I wanted to go stop with put a stop on right here on this conversation, because this is going to lead into something that we're going to talk about next week. Now, we're going to talk about the relationships between men and women in a much deeper detail next week, but we have to talk about it in the context of something else that is causing us to rebel against God, something else that is causing us to disobey him at rates that we haven't seen before, probably in human history, where we're at as a society right now. We have to tackle the sin of lust. And the sin of lust is in many, many forms in our society right now. You look at pornography and how people have crippling porn addictions right now. You're looking at OnlyFans, both the people who are buying OnlyFans and the people who are putting out content for OnlyFans, this sexually charged content. You're talking about the ideas of hookup culture, that you shouldn't save yourself for marriage and you shouldn't go out there and find someone who shares your values and anything. You should just go out there and sleep with as many people as you possibly can and become as emotionally broken as you possibly can. This is a big, big problem. And this is a problem not just for men, even though there's a lot of men out there that struggle with this. This is also a problem for women too. And people don't really talk about the problems that women have with lust as well. So we're going to talk about this next week on our podcast, part 3 of our series of Do Not Love the World. We're going to tackle the sins of lust. So I think that's going to be one that we're going to talk about. We're going to show you guys some things, probably going to be a little bit disturbing, but they have to be talked about here. I'm not showing you guys porn or anything like that. I'm not doing that. Just if you guys thought that we were showing that on the show next week, like, no, but we are going to show some things that highlight just how twisted and perverted our world has become, and people need to see this because it's just something that everyone's struggling with right now and it needs to be talked about. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the floor to you guys. I'm gonna start with Sam. Final thoughts on everything that we've talked about here tonight, just kind of your general overview of the division of our world. And like I said, we've talked about ways that we can give the best advice, kind of counteracting this. Just give your general thoughts on our topic here tonight. Sam?
Oh, okay.
I said your name before I said all that.
Well, okay. Usually you like pop us up on the full screen, so I was happy.
Oh, no. That's when I give you guys the plugs. But no, this is final thoughts.
Okay. Final thoughts. We're 3 imperfect people sitting here trying to make sense of how to do life, but we're coming at it from a biblical lens. So just get in your Bibles. You're not too far gone. Jesus loves you, and don't hate people. It's really rude. And,
don't hate people, but don't love the world.
Yeah, we're just people. Everybody's just people. yeah, do your thing, read your Bible. That's my final thoughts.
Johnny, I'm going to go ahead and flip this one over to you. Final thoughts on tonight.
My final thought is to hate as few people as possible.
Maybe just 3.
If you could keep it, no, just
just keep it to hating yourself, and that's about it.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know. I think having like a united church body could be just pretty powerful in general. It would make the church like stand out among all the hatred. So yeah, I would just try not to be rude to people outside the church and try and love the people inside the church as much as possible. And bring people to Christ like through example.
Very good. And look, my takeaway from this whole night is, and like I said, we're going through the steps of making you look at the world much differently than you look at it now, because there are a lot of people who look at the world and they love the things that they have, collective, the things that they have done, and they love a lot of the aspects of the world, whether it's, consuming media, going out in the world and living life and stuff like that. But like I said, you have to understand just how wicked this world truly is, because like I said, we've talked about the ways in the world that people worship money and what worshiping money leads to, and it's always evil, and it's always envy, and it's always hatred. And then if you look at the concept of hatred, it always leads to dividing people and making people hate each other, and making them hate each other based on how much money is in their bank account, or what gender they are, what race they are, what political party they voted for, what politician they voted for. And you're starting to see, like, when you really start to understand just how wicked the world truly is, and we go back to the original saying here, do not love the world. Whoever loves the world, the love of the Father is not in them. When you understand just how evil and wicked the world really is, there's no possible way that you can love the world more than you love God. That's just the end of it when it comes down to it. And you really have to kind of like dig down, reflect, look around at the world around you, and see just how everywhere you turn, whether it's the people, whether it's the culture, whether it's the media, is trying to get you to rebel against God. And if you're on the world of faith, if you're on the world, especially if you're a Christian, you have to be able to look at the traps that are being set out for you and learn how to avoid those traps, because those are traps that could or could not be held against you when it all comes down. When you're sitting in the room of judgment and you're being questioned on some of the decisions that you made in your life, you got to look and see it, like, if this is something that is constantly causing me to fall, or constantly causing me to, go into a direction that I don't want to come to, you have to start isolating it, and you have to start figuring out, okay, how can I improve on this? How can I get rid of this out of my life? Because I know that this isn't good for me, and I need to remove this if I'm going to go down the path that I need to go down. And we're hopefully the next few weeks here, we'll start identifying some of these things. Like I said, next week here on the show, we're going to be talking about the subject of lust. So now is the point of the show where I can get you guys to promote anything that you guys got coming up. And now Sam can get her highlights. You can get her spotlight.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, you can follow me on TikTok. Sam got a TikTok. Yeah, read your Bible, eat your vegetables. That is all. Don't follow Satan.
Say your prayers, eat your vitamins. What else did Hulk Hogan say? Let me tell you something, brother. No, never mind. So good word here for Sam. Johnny, I know you got a Substack there. What do you got coming up?
Yeah, godsrevealed.substack.com. I don't know what I have coming up, so we'll kind of just figure it out.
All right, and then letting you guys know what I got coming up on the show tomorrow night. So tomorrow night, episode 68 of the Barroom Podcast. I spent all weekend getting digital re-uploads on all of our episodes here, so I do have copies of those shows. We're gonna put them up here. If you guys haven't checked my my description on the video below, I have a site called sitereviews.com. Everything that I've ever written over the last 7.5 years is on that site. all the videos that we've done, all the movie nights, all the ballroom episodes, Bible Lens episodes, movie reviews. I have like over 500, 600 movie reviews on there. Everything's on that site. Go check that out. I got a whole list of stuff. If you guys want to get my thoughts on movies and the world of entertainment, go watch that stuff over there. It's in the description if you guys want to check it out in your own time. But like I said, tomorrow night, Ballroom Podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about Ice Cube trying to distance himself from the negative influence that NWA had on society, how gangster rap had on society. We're going to talk about that tomorrow with Mark with a C, who should be on the podcast tomorrow as well. So he'll be joining us. Leslie Jones is going around claiming that her 3 abortions saved her life. We'll talk about her comments tomorrow night on the podcast. Dax Shepard gets heat from people with literal AIDS over context that he made about trans kids. I know that sounds like a joke. That's not a joke. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Britney Spears is nuts. I don't know if you guys have realized this. Britney Spears is completely crazy. We're going to talk about that tomorrow because maybe you guys who were talking about Free Britney were 100% dead wrong. There's a possibility that was the case. And we're going to talk about the Taylor Swift thing, not really in the context of the NFL, but more Taylor Swift being essentially primed by the governor of California to be the person who can sway the 2024 election. So we'll talk about that tomorrow night as well. That's a Ballroom Podcast Tuesday night. This Friday night, we're going to be back here for the Friday Night Movie Club, episode 56. And we're going to change up the format a little bit here. So we'll be on YouTube, we'll be on Rumble, we'll be on Twitch for all 3 platforms. The first 30 minutes of that show we'll do here on YouTube. The first 30 minutes, we're going to have some guests. We're going to talk about some things, talk about the context of the movie. And then we're going to end the show on YouTube. We're going to jump over to Rumble, jump over to Twitch, and then we'll actually watch the movie and commentate with the movie with the guys live on Friday night. So check that out. If anyone wants to join us here for that Friday night show, definitely just hit me up. There's going to be some spots open, but that's going to be what we're going to do on Friday night. And then, like I said, we told you guys what's going to happen Monday night, next Monday night here on the show, episode 13 of the Bible Lens podcast. We'll talk about lust. We'll talk about the divide of men and women. So that's everything that we got coming up on the channel. For all of our guests who joined us here tonight, which means Sam and Johnny, I thank you for joining me for another Monday night once again here on this show. To everyone who joined us in the chat tonight, Truth, Spencer, Don't Let Him Burn, Kat, Vanya, Duke Nukem, Awesome One. I want to make sure that I get everybody here on this one. Make sure I didn't forget anyone. I think that covers it. And of course, Alex, who literally just joined us at the very last moment here on the show, saying, great stream and much love to everyone. Thank you for joining. For everyone who joined us on Rumble and on Twitch, we thank you guys. We're going to go ahead and cap off this show with the gospel from Vodi Bakum. So until then, we'll see you tomorrow night in the ballroom, Friday night on the movie show. Maybe we'll see you guys here next Monday night for another episode. So give them the very, what is this clap? Is this like the preppy British clap or something like that?
That's the Genovian wave.
Yeah, I hate that.
Diaries.
This is what you do on a runway, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think this is what you're doing, like you're British and just have a lot of money and you want to wave to the peasants.
It's all that money.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
When people say, no, our problem is this, our problem is that, we say, no. Our problem is that God created the world. And God created man, and he put man in the garden to keep the garden. And he gave the man a command. And he held that man to perfect, perpetual obedience to that command. And he promised him life if he kept it, and death if he didn't. And he didn't keep it. He ate. And because he ate, because of that one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. And everyone born from that man through ordinary generation inherited that man's sin nature. And because of that sin nature, sins proceed from it. And our world is broken because of that sin. And we stand guilty before a holy and righteous God. And we know that he's holy, and we know that he's righteous, and we crave justice. But the problem is that if God gives us justice, we all die. And so that God, in his goodness and in his mercy, sent forth his son, who was not born of ordinary generation, but was born of a virgin. Yes, the virgin birth matters. Why? Because if he's born of ordinary generation, he's born in sin. But because he's not born of ordinary generation, he's not born in sin. He's clean of sin. His record is clean. And he keeps his record clean. and he obeys God's law. And because he's fully God and fully man, he obeys the law of God on our behalf in his active obedience. And then in his passive obedience, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. All we like sheep had gone astray. Each of us had turned to his own way, but God laid upon him the iniquity of us all. And Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust. And God imputes our sinfulness to him. And he nails our sinfulness to the tree. And Christ dies and raises again on the third day for our justification. And there's another imputation. The righteousness of Christ is actually imputed to us so that God can be both just and the justifier of the one who places faith in Jesus Christ, so that all those who come to Christ may enter in, so that all those who place faith in Christ might be saved, but not only saved, but sanctified, because he's the firstborn of many brethren. We're justified and we're adopted into the family of God, and we're sanctified, and as his children we begin to bear the family resemblance, and we're further sanctified throughout this life by the very same gospel that saves us, until one day when it's all said and done, we're not just saved from the penalty of sin, we're not just saved from the power of sin, but one day we're glorified and saved from the very presence of sin. That's the gospel that we preach. That's the gospel that we need. And that's the gospel that's more than enough.